Let's jump into it. Number 5. The Antikythera Mechanism. Imagine finding a lump of corroded bronze at the bottom of the sea and realizing you just discovered ancient Greece's secret computer. That's basically what happened when sponge divers pulled the Antikythera Mechanism out of a shipwreck in 1901. At first, everyone assumed it was junk. Then scientists X-rayed it decades later and lost their minds, because inside this crusty blob were over 30 interlocking gears, precise enough to track the moon's phases, predict eclipses, and even calendar the Olympic Games. This thing is basically an analog iPhone from 150 BCE, except way better engineered than anything else from that era for the next 1,000 years. Nobody has found a device even close to this complex until medieval clockwork shows up over a millennium later. That's the archaeological equivalent of finding a smartphone in a Roman sandal shop and then not seeing another one until World War II. Here's the psychological gut punch. Our brains are wired to assume progress is a straight line. Technology gets better in a tidy upward slope. The Antikythera Mechanism smashes that assumption into gear-shaped confetti. It suggests entire branches of ancient genius just vanished, swallowed by wars, fires, or plain old bad luck, taking their blueprints with them. So somewhere out there, some Greek nerd invented the astrolabe's overachieving cousin, and humanity collectively forgot how to make it. Basically, civilization hit snooze on its own alarm clock for 1,000 years. Number 4. The Baghdad Battery. Picture a clay jar, a copper cylinder, and an iron rod, all stacked together like some ancient science fair project. That's the Baghdad Battery, dug up near Iraq, and dated to somewhere around 200 BCE to 224 CE. The wild part is that when researchers recreated it and filled it with something acidic like vinegar or grape juice, it actually generated a small electrical current, not enough to charge your phone, but enough to make historians spill their coffee. Nobody knows for sure what it was actually used for. Some think it was for electroplating gold onto jewelry, basically ancient bling making. Others think it had a religious purpose, maybe zapping unsuspecting temple visitors with a mild shock disguised as divine power, which honestly sounds like the oldest prank in human history. Your brain wants a tidy explanation because uncertainty feels like an itch you can't scratch, but archaeology doesn't care about your comfort. It just hands you a mysterious jar and walks away. What makes this so unsettling is the timeline. We're taught that electricity is a modern discovery, something Franklin and Edison practically invented from scratch. But if this jar really was a battery, someone was tinkering with electrochemistry nearly 2,000 years before Volta got credit for the concept. Either it's a genuine electrical device history forgot, or it's just a spice container that accidentally looks electric. Basically, ancient Mesopotamia might have quietly beaten the entire world to the power outlet, then lost the manual. Number 3. Puma Punku's Impossible Stones. Somewhere in the Bolivian highlands sits a ruin called Puma Punku, and it looks less like ancient architecture and more like a jigsaw puzzle designed by someone who hated puzzles. The stone blocks are cut with such precise right angles and interlocking grooves that they fit together like Lego pieces, except each piece weighs several tons. Modern engineers using diamond-tipped tools still struggle to replicate this kind of precision on the same rock type. Meanwhile, the people who supposedly built this had, as far as we know, no iron tools, no wheels for hauling, and no draft animals strong enough to drag multi-ton stones across rugged terrain. Your instinct is probably screaming aliens, and to be fair, that theory has been marketed harder than a Vegas magic show, but the more grounded explanation is that we simply underestimate ancient labor coordination. Thousands of workers, clever leverage systems, wet sand for reducing friction, and generations of patience can accomplish things that look impossible to a species addicted to power tools and same-day shipping. Still, the exact methods remain genuinely debated, and that gap between "we have a theory" and "we actually know" is where all the good conspiracy theories go to breed. Basically, ancient Andean builders pulled off a stone-cutting flex so precise it made 21st-century engineers feel personally attacked. Number 2. The Nazca Lines. Somewhere in the Peruvian desert, there are drawings so massive you literally cannot appreciate them unless you're floating in the sky, which is exactly the problem. The Nazca Lines are enormous geoglyphs, hummingbirds, monkeys, spiders, and geometric shapes etched into the ground, some stretching hundreds of feet long. The people who made them, sometime between 500 BCE and 500 CE, had no airplanes, no drones, no hot air balloons that we know of. Yet somehow they created art that only makes visual sense from a bird's eye view. This is where your brain starts doing somersaults. How do you design something you can never fully see yourself? Turns out humans are shockingly good at scaling patterns, using simple tools like stakes, ropes, and a solid understanding of proportion, sort of like enlarging a doodle on a napkin into a mural, just with way more sand and way more commitment. Some researchers think the lines were ritualistic, maybe walked as prayers to sky deities, or used to track water sources in one of the driest places on Earth. The real mystery isn't just how they built them, it's why they insisted on making art meant for an audience they'd never meet, unless they somehow believed the gods themselves were watching from above. Basically, ancient Peruvians created the world's first geotagged Instagram post, except the only follower who could see it was allegedly a deity. Number 1. The Voynich Manuscript. Imagine a book that looks like a fantasy grimoire, filled with bizarre plants that don't exist in nature, naked women bathing in green liquid, and an entire language nobody on Earth can read. That's the Voynich Manuscript, a medieval codex dated to the early 1400s, and after over a century of cryptographers, linguists, and even wartime codebreakers throwing themselves at it, absolutely nobody has cracked its writing system. Your first assumption is probably that it's just some elaborate hoax, and honestly that's a fair guess, since fake mystical texts were basically the medieval equivalent of clickbait. But radiocarbon dating confirms the vellum is genuinely old, ruling out a modern prank. Whoever wrote this used a script with consistent grammar-like patterns, meaning it likely isn't random gibberish. It behaves like a real language, just one that refuses to introduce itself. Theories range from an unknown European dialect, to an elaborate cipher, to a wellness manual written by someone who clearly had unique taste in botanical illustration. Every few years someone claims they've finally solved it, and every few years actual linguists calmly dismantle that claim within days. Basically, humanity built the internet, split the atom, and mapped the human genome, yet a 500-year-old book, with drawings of plants that shouldn't exist, continues to make our smartest people look like confused toddlers holding a decoder ring upside down. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.